It was a bright afternoon in Atlanta, and Officer Bradley was sitting in his patrol car near a busy street. He was young, full of energy, and eager to make a name for himself. He had only been on the police force for a few months, and he still carried the excitement of being new. When his radio crackled about a suspicious man near a jewelry store, he quickly started the car. The report said a tall black man in a dark jacket was acting strange and might be connected to a robbery that happened earlier that week. Without asking for more details, Bradley decided to go check it out. When he reached the area, he saw a man walking near a parking lot. The man was tall, wearing a black jacket and carrying a gym bag over his shoulder. Bradley's heart began to beat faster. He was sure this was the person in the report. He didn't notice the man's calm walk or the way he was just looking at his phone. All Bradley saw was what matched the call. He parked his car quickly, stepped out, and shouted, "Hey, stop right there." The man turned around slowly, looking surprised. "Is there a problem, officer?" he asked in a calm voice. Bradley didn't answer. His mind was full of assumptions. He rushed forward, grabbing the man's arm roughly. "Hands where I can see them," he said loudly. The man tried to explain, "Officer, I think." But before he could finish, Bradley pushed him against the hood of a nearby car. The man winced slightly but didn't fight back. People walking nearby stopped to watch. Some pulled out their phones. A woman across the street shouted, "Hey, he didn't do anything." Bradley didn't hear her. His focus was only on making the arrest. He pulled out his handcuffs and locked one wrist. The man kept his voice low and said, "You're making a mistake." But Bradley didn't stop. He reached into the man's jacket, looking for an ID or a weapon. Then something small and shiny slipped from the man's pocket and fell to the ground. It was a badge, a golden federal badge with the words Department of Homeland Security engraved on it. Everything stopped for a second. Bradley froze, staring at it. The crowd went silent. The man slowly looked over his shoulder and said in a steady voice, "You just hit the wrong man, officer." Bradley stepped back quickly, his heart pounding for a different reason now. He looked at the badge again to be sure. The man turned around, calm but disappointed, and said, "I'm Special Agent Marcus Hill." He held up the badge for everyone to see. "I'm here on assignment. You made a huge mistake." Bradley's face turned pale. He felt his stomach drop. His hands began to shake as he stammered. I didn't know." "I thought," Marcus interrupted gently, "you didn't think." He reacted. There was no anger in his voice, only quiet disappointment that by now 2 more police cars had arrived. The officers who stepped out recognized Marcus immediately. "Agent Hill," one of them said in surprise. They looked from him to Bradley and understood what had happened. "Sir, we're sorry," one officer said quickly, trying to calm the situation. But the crowd had already seen everything. Dozens of phones were still recording. People were whispering, "He's a federal agent. That rookie's in trouble. This is going viral." Bradley wanted to disappear. He looked down, his mind spinning with panic. He had made a fool of himself in front of everyone. Worse, he had disrespected another officer, a federal one. He mumbled, "Sir, I'm so sorry." "I didn't mean." Marcus raised his hand quietly. "Don't explain now," he said. "We'll talk at the station." Bradley nodded, unable to meet his eyes. Marcus straightened his jacket, took his gym bag, and walked toward his car. The crowd slowly began to leave, but many still shook their heads as they walked away. Bradley stood there, motionless, feeling the weight of every stare dot at the station. Later, word had already spread. Officers whispered about what had happened. Some laughed softly, others shook their heads. Bradley sat alone at his desk, his heart heavy. He thought about how quickly everything had gone wrong, how one careless action had destroyed the trust he was supposed to protect. He didn't even know if he would still have a job by tomorrow when the door opened and Agent Marcus Hill walked in. The room went silent. He was calm, professional, but his eyes said everything. He looked at Bradley, then at the chief, and said, "I'd like to speak with him privately." The chief nodded and left him alone in the office. Bradley stood up nervously. "Sir, I can't say how sorry I am. I reacted too fast. I just wanted to do my job." Marcus looked at him for a long moment and then said, "You wanted to do your job. But the first part of your job is to think before you act." His voice was calm, firm, and full of authority. You saw a man who fit a vague description and forgot to look at the person. Bradley swallowed hard, his eyes lowering. "I thought I was helping," he whispered. Marcus shook his head. "You were chasing fear, not facts. You didn't ask questions. You didn't observe. You just reacted. That's not what the badge is for." Bradley wanted to explain himself more, but no words came. He knew Marcus was right. He had acted on instinct and appearance instead of truth. The silence in the room grew heavy. Then Marcus sighed and said, "You're new, aren't you?" Bradley nodded slowly. 6 months, he admitted. Marcus thought for a moment and said, "Then learn from this. You'll make mistakes, but don't make the same one twice." He stepped closer, his tone softening. "When you wear that uniform, people trust you. Don't give them a reason not to." Bradley nodded again. His throat felt tight. He said quietly, "I'm truly sorry, sir." Marcus looked at him, then offered a hand. "Do better," he said simply. Bradley hesitated, then shook his hand firmly. That small handshake said more than words. It wasn't about anger or punishment. It was about responsibility. Marcus turned to leave, but stopped at the door. "And officer," he said without turning around, "next time, don't let your first reaction be fear. Let it be fairness." When he left, Bradley sat down and took a deep breath. He felt ashamed, but also grateful. The man he had wronged could have ended his career instantly. Instead, Marcus had chosen to teach him a lesson he would never forget. That night, Bradley couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the moment the badge hit the ground, and Marcus's calm voice saying, "You hit the wrong man." He realized that real strength wasn't about showing power. It was about showing control, the kind of calm that Marcus had shown in that moment. The next morning, Bradley went back to work with a different heart. He promised himself he would never let assumptions guide him again. And though people still talked about the mistake, he carried that lesson quietly, knowing that sometimes the most powerful teachers are the ones who choose understanding over anger. The next morning felt heavy for Officer Bradley. The events of the previous day kept replaying in his mind like a film he couldn't turn off. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Agent Marcus Hill's calm face and heard those words, "You hit the wrong man." He couldn't shake off the guilt that burned quietly inside him. He arrived early at the station, hoping to avoid the stares and whispers. But the moment he stepped through the door, he could feel the silence. Everyone had heard what happened. Some looked away, others just stared. It felt like a cold spotlight was following him. Bradley tried to focus on his reports, but his hands kept shaking. He wasn't afraid of losing his job. He was afraid of losing his self-respect. The uniform he had once worn proudly now felt heavier than ever. He wished he could explain himself, but deep down, he knew there was no excuse. He had judged someone without thought, without fairness. He had failed the promise he made when he pinned the badge to his chest for the first time. Just after noon, the door opened, and the chief walked in with Agent Marcus Hill beside him. The room grew quiet. Every officer looked up. Marcus looked calm, dressed in a dark suit, holding a file in his hand. The chief said, "Agent Hill has agreed to speak to the department today. Everyone, listen." Bradley's heart sank. He expected a public scolding or maybe worse. He thought Marcus might report him officially or demand punishment. But Marcus's voice surprised everyone. It wasn't angry. It was calm, steady, and full of weight thought. He started by saying, "Yesterday, an officer made a mistake. But I'm not here to destroy anyone's career. I'm here to remind everyone what this badge means." His eyes moved across the room, stopping on Bradley for a moment before moving on. Fear and judgment don't belong in this job. We're here to protect, not to assume. We're here to serve, not to control. The officers listened quietly. Bradley kept his eyes on the floor, his hands folded tightly. Marcus continued, "Yesterday could have gone very differently. I could have reacted with anger. But that's not who we are supposed to be. We don't teach by shouting. We teach by example." The chief nodded silently, impressed. Marcus looked at Bradley again and said, "Officer Bradley made a mistake. But he did something important after that. He listened." Bradley's head rose slightly, surprised. Marcus went on. He admitted what went wrong and understood the lesson. That matters more than pretending we're perfect. When the short meeting ended, Marcus walked over to Bradley quietly. The other officers went back to work, pretending not to watch. Bradley stood, nervous, and said, "Thank you, sir." "For not—" He couldn't finish his sentence. Marcus smiled faintly. "For not ruining your life?" he said softly. Bradley nodded. Marcus replied, "That's not my job. My job is to make sure you don't repeat the same mistake again." They walked together out of the building and down to the parking lot. The sun was warm, and for the first time since yesterday, Bradley felt he could breathe. Marcus leaned against his car and said, "You remind me of myself when I started. I was young, too, and I thought acting fast made me strong. But I learned that real strength comes from patience." Bradley listened carefully, every word sinking deep. Marcus continued, "You see, power is easy to misuse. It's easy to let fear guide you. But if you do, you stop being an officer and start being a threat. You're better than that, Bradley. You just forgot to slow down." Bradley nodded, grateful for the kindness. "I won't forget this, sir," he said. Marcus smiled a little. "Good, because one day, another rookie will make a mistake like you did. And it'll be your turn to teach him with calm instead of anger." They shook hands again, firm, respectful, and full of meaning. For Bradley, that handshake felt like forgiveness. For Marcus, it felt like closure. They both knew that something had changed in that moment, not just between them, but in how Bradley saw his job, his duty, and the people he was sworn to protect. Weeks passed, and things slowly settled down. The video from that day had spread online, but the story didn't go the way many expected. Instead of a scandal, it became a story of patience and forgiveness. The clip of Marcus calmly showing his badge and saying, "You hit the wrong man," became a lesson used in police training videos about control and respect. Bradley kept working, quietly rebuilding his reputation. He didn't try to hide what happened. Instead, he spoke honestly to other officers about his mistake. When new recruits joined, he would tell them, "Don't rush to judge. I did once, and I almost lost everything." His honesty earned him respect. Slowly but surely, one morning, the chief called him into his office. Bradley walked in nervously, wondering if he had done something wrong. But the chief was smiling. "You're being transferred to the city task force," he said. "Agent Hill requested you." Bradley was stunned. "He did?" he asked. The chief nodded. Said he could use an officer who's learned humility. When Bradley arrived at the task force office, Marcus was there, sitting at a desk with a coffee in hand. "Welcome, partner," Marcus said with a grin. Bradley laughed nervously, still a little shy. "I didn't think I'd see you again this soon." Marcus replied, "You didn't think I'd let a good lesson go to waste. Did you?" From that day on, they worked together. Marcus trained Bradley not just in investigation, but in self-control, observation, and understanding human behavior. "Every person you meet is fighting a story you can't see," Marcus said one day while they were on duty. "Your job isn't to judge their story. It's to listen to it." Bradley took those words to heart. Over time, his confidence returned, but it was different now. It wasn't pride or ego. It was quiet strength. He became known for being calm, fair, and thoughtful in difficult situations. Even when others reacted quickly, Bradley stayed composed, remembering the day he almost lost everything because of one mistake. Months later, while they were wrapping up a joint operation, Marcus looked over and said, "You've changed." Bradley smiled and replied, "I had a good teacher." Marcus laughed lightly. "You had a hard lesson," he corrected, "but you learned it well." One evening, as they left the office, Marcus stopped by his car and said, "You know, Bradley, I forgave you not because you deserved it, but because someone once forgave me too. That's how we grow, one act of grace at a time." Bradley nodded, understanding fully now what those words meant. Years later, when Bradley himself became a senior officer, he carried that lesson forward. Whenever he saw a young officer act out of fear or hurry, he would put a hand on their shoulder and say calmly, "Slow down. Think first. Don't repeat my old mistake." He became known not for how many arrests he made, but for how fairly he treated people. And whenever he saw Agent Marcus Hill at events or meetings, they would share a knowing smile, a silent reminder of that day in the parking lot. It wasn't just a story of a mistake anymore. It was a story of learning, forgiveness, and respect. Bradley often told younger officers, "One calm man changed my whole life." Not with anger, but with understanding. And whenever he said it, he meant every word. Because he knew that real heroes aren't the ones who shout the loudest. They're the ones who stay calm and teach the hardest. Lessons with quiet grace. And so, the young officer who once acted too fast became the man who always took a moment to pause. Because one day, a calm agent had shown him what true strength really looked like.